Let's start by looking at the main page component in Pages, index.js, where React is imported to work with JSX and components. Here, we're also importing fetch data from our components directory, which is a server component designated to fetch data on the server side. In the function component homepage, which is the default export, we return JSX that will be rendered to the user. The most important part to note here is the fetch data component, which we'll explore in a moment. By rendering fetch data in this page component, we are telling Next.js to fetch and render data on the server side before serving the page to the user. Moving on to our server component, which is in Components, Fetch Data Server.js. Notice the server.js file extension, which is essential for Next.js to understand that this component should only be rendered on the server. We import React to use JSX syntax. Inside the component, we currently have a constant called data that simulates the result of a server-side data fetch. Typically, you might use fetch or any data fetching library to get data from an external source like an API or database here. We then render a div with a header and a paragraph element to display the data. This JSX will be rendered on the server and sent to the client as HTML, reducing the client-side workload. Lastly, let's look at the next config.js file. This configuration file may be necessary for your Next.js application to enable server components. Here, we have an experimental key with a nested server components flag set to true. This tells Next.js that we're opting into using this feature, which is still in experimental phase as of the version 14. As the server components feature becomes more stable and officially part of the framework, this configuration might change or no longer be required. Remember to always check the latest documentation for the most up-to-date practices.